I was terrible. No, that's all right. I'm just trying to think. I want to make sure that my son, no, he won't see this show.
Everyone remembers Jack Lemmon as the funny guy, the charming actor who made people laugh for decades. But behind every joke was a kid who believed his happiness was the only thing holding his family together. His parents slept in separate rooms. His mother lived in a hotel instead of coming home. And by the time he was 12, he had already spent almost 2 years in hospitals. He later admitted something that shocked even his closest friends. He called himself a manic depressive before he even knew what the term meant. The real story behind his famous smile is darker than anyone expected. Jack Lemmon's story began in a way that almost felt like a warning about the life he was about to live. On February 8, 1925, his mother waited a little too long to go to the hospital because she didn't want to leave a competitive bridge game. By the time her water broke, she and her husband were rushing to Newton Wellesley Hospital, but they never made it to a delivery room. The elevator stopped between the 5th and 6th floors, and that was where Jack entered the world. 2 months too early with jaundiced skin that startled a nurse enough to say, "Look at that yellow lemon." The nickname stuck, and it shaped him long before he knew what it meant. People later joked that the hospital should have put a plaque in that elevator, but they never did. And in many ways, that strange birth set the tone for a life full of sudden turns and quiet strength. After that moment, his mother's attitude shifted almost instantly. While still in the elevator, she reportedly shouted "never again," and she meant it. She never returned to live in the family home. Instead, she checked herself into the Ritz-Carlton and stayed there for years. Jack spent countless afternoons visiting her in that hotel, wandering the hallways like a kid, trying to understand why his mother preferred room service and distance over family dinners. His parents kept up a polite front, but they slept in separate rooms and lived in separate worlds. His father traveled so often for business that Jack sometimes wondered if the man preferred hotel rooms too. The whole arrangement created a quiet ache that followed Jack everywhere, and he tried to fill that space the only way he knew how, by performing for people, by trying to make them laugh before they noticed the heaviness around him. He was only 7 when he started distracting guests with a routine he made up himself. He created 25 different snores, each sillier than the last, because he realized laughter was the only thing that softened the tension in his house. Every night had a small crisis brewing beneath the air, but Jack worked hard to pretend everything was fine. His parents never argued in front of him, but he could feel the truth behind their silence. They stayed married for appearances until he turned 18, never separating on paper but already separated in every other way. His comedy became a shield, a way to keep the peace, and for a long time he believed that if he stayed cheerful enough, everyone else would too. His childhood wasn't just shaped by emotional strain. His body carried its own burdens. Before he turned 12, he spent almost 2 full years in hospitals. He went through 3 major ear surgeries before he was 10, and all that time stuck in bed altered the way he held himself. The slouched posture that he later used so well on screen wasn't a character choice at first. It came from those surgeries and long stretches of recovery. Still, he pushed himself harder than anyone expected. As a teenager, he ran fast enough to break the New England record for the 2-mile run. Pain didn't slow him down. It only pushed him to outrun the parts of his life that felt too heavy. Inside, though, he carried a different kind of weight. He later described himself as a pathologically happy kid because he believed that his forced cheerfulness might hold his parents together. He felt responsible for the emotional weather in the house, and that pressure followed him into adulthood. He once said he was a manic depressive before he even knew the term. The smile people loved on screen grew out of a childhood where he thought sadness was dangerous and happiness was survival. When he turned 18 in 1943, his life took another turn. The war was in full swing, and he entered the V-12 Navy College training program at Harvard. It was a demanding schedule of classes, drills, and military routines designed to turn college kids into officers. He wore uniforms to class, studied engineering and war service sciences, and still found time for the stage. He became president of the Hasty Pudding Club and kept acting, even using pseudonyms like Timothy Orange whenever academic trouble threatened to pull him out of performances. The program trained more than 125,000 students across 131 colleges, and Jack became one of the many young men pulled between classrooms and war. His Navy service became very real when he was commissioned as an ensign and sent to the USS Lake Champlain in the Pacific. He handled classified messages, coordinated with pilots, and watched the war unfold from the decks during the final stages, including the Okinawa campaign in 1945. His time on the ship was short, only a few months, but it changed him. The quiet discipline he carried for the rest of his career started there. After the war, he returned to Harvard and finished his degree in 1947, ready for whatever came next. By 1953, he stepped onto the Broadway stage for the revival of Room Service. The show opened on April 6th at the Court Theater and closed just 16 days later. It could have felt like another disappointment, but something unexpected happened. A Columbia Pictures casting director named Max Arno was in the audience. He spotted the spark in Jack's performance and took his name straight to the top. Columbia boss Harry Cohn wanted to sign him, but also wanted to change his name to Lennon. Worried people would mock the word lemon. Jack replied that Lennon would be even worse since it sounded like the communist leader. That joke saved his name and his identity. The short Broadway run suddenly felt less like a failure and more like a doorway. That doorway opened wider in 1954 when he starred opposite Judy Holliday in It Should Happen to You. The film was a hit, and people began noticing how natural he felt in front of a camera. Cohn then signed him to a 7-year contract that unusually allowed him to take outside projects. It was rare, almost unheard of, and it showed how much Columbia believed in him. He went from unknown to rising star in a single leap. Then came Mr. Roberts in 1955. He played Ensign Pulver beside giants like Henry Fonda and James Cagney, yet he held his own with a mix of humor and vulnerability. When the Academy Awards arrived in 1956, no one expected him to walk away with the Best Supporting Actor Oscar, especially not against Marlon Brando. But he did. It shocked Hollywood. His acceptance speech was modest, but the moment changed everything. He had stepped into a new world and belonged there. 2 years later, in Operation Mad Ball, he showed a different side of himself. The film was a military farce, and he jumped into the role with energy, improvising scenes and entertaining the cast between takes. What surprised everyone was his piano playing. He had been playing since he was young, long before he became an actor, and the crew often gathered around just to listen. It was another part of him rising from the shadows, another talent shaped by a childhood where he learned to turn quiet pain into something musical. Jack Lemmon's shift into Fire Down Below in 1957 came at a moment when he was still mostly known as a light comedian, yet something in him wanted to stretch a little farther. The movie pulled him into the Caribbean heat, and the production took the cast all the way to Trinidad and Tobago, which made the whole thing feel more alive than most studio shoots of that time. The budget sat at $1.5 million, a heavy number back then, and Lemmon stepped in as Felix, a tramp boat owner who fell into a smuggling ring that kept tightening around him. He even wrote and played his own harmonica theme for the film, adding a touch only he could give. As the story grew darker, the climax pushed him into a real stunt where he was pinned under a girder in a burning ship and had to choose between losing a limb or losing his life. An explosion saved him on screen, and behind the camera, he still managed to shine even with Rita Hayworth and Robert Mitchum towering nearby. Albert R. Broccoli, who would later shape the James Bond world, even appeared as a smuggler, and that tiny detail wrapped the film in a little Hollywood trivia. It was the kind of project that showed how fast Lemmon's star was rising. 2 years later, he stepped into Some Like It Hot, and everything in his life began to shift again. The film arrived in 1959 and brought him to Billy Wilder for the first time. He slipped into the role of Daphne with a kind of wild joy, and during the very last scene, he tossed out the line "Nobody's perfect" without thinking twice. Nobody expected it to stick, yet it turned into one of the most quoted lines in movie history. The movie itself was risky for its time because Lemmon and Tony Curtis had to disguise themselves as women to escape gangsters, and the whole idea stirred up controversy and battles with censors before release. The budget reached $2.9 million, and when the movie earned more than $25 million worldwide, it became a massive hit. Wilder knew the long days could be exhausting, so he kept a piano on set so Lemmon could play between takes, which helped keep the energy light. The film landed 6 Oscar nominations, 1 for Lemmon himself, and from that moment on, people stopped treating him as a simple comedian and started viewing him as something much bigger. That same year, It Happened to Jane brought him into a gentler world as George Denham, a small-town lawyer defending Doris Day's character after a railroad company destroyed 300 lobsters in May 1959. The story came from real events in Maine and carried that warm underdog feeling that Lemmon handled so well. The $1.2 million budget was modest compared to Hollywood's giants, yet the charm made it memorable. The film even used real television segments of Doris Day to show how media can turn a community battle into something bigger. Lemmon and Day clicked so naturally that he later said he wished they had worked together again. The film never soared the way some of his others did, but audiences who found it kept it close. A year earlier, Cowboy had already nudged him in a dramatic direction. Released in 1958 with Glenn Ford beside him, the film placed Lemmon as Frank Harris, a hotel clerk who wanted more from life and found himself on a cattle drive that tested him through every mile. It was shot in Technicolor with a budget of $1.8 million, and much of it unfolded across the rugged landscapes of Mexico, which gave it a realness audiences felt right away. The story came from Frank Harris's own memoirs, and Lemmon's performance moved from nervous inexperience to quiet strength in a way critics immediately noticed. Dalton Trumbo, still blacklisted at the time, wrote the screenplay under a hidden name. People later said Lemmon's work here helped him get considered for Butch Cassidy years later. It was another sign that his dramatic muscles were stronger than anyone expected. Bell, Book and Candle followed soon after, landing at the end of 1958 with Kim Novak as a witch who tangled her powers around him. Lemmon played Nikki Holroyd, a writer who fell so deeply under her spell that when the magic faded, he was left standing in heartbreak. The film cost $1.4 million and became a holiday classic over time. Lemmon even earned a BAFTA nomination, which was rare for a romantic comedy then. It blended fantasy and romance and wrapped it all in New York charm, and Lemmon's warmth kept the story glowing. Then came The Apartment in 1960, a piece that seemed to catch everything he had inside him and carry it to the world. As C.C. Baxter, he played a lonely office worker who lent his apartment to executives for their affairs, and the story balanced humor and sadness in a way audiences had never seen before. The budget sat at $3 million, and the film made more than $18 million in the United States, and nearly 25 million worldwide, making it one of the biggest hits of 1960. It earned 10 Oscar nominations and won 5, including Best Picture and Best Director. Lemmon received another Oscar nomination and soon after a BAFTA and a Golden Globe. People began to talk about him as one of the most complete actors of his era. Only 2 years later, he stepped into Days of Wine and Roses, and something in him cracked open on screen. He played Joe Clay, a charismatic executive whose drinking spiraled into devastation. The performance felt painfully real because Lemmon himself was struggling with alcoholism during filming. Blake Edwards, the director, was fighting the same battle, and together they created a story that showed addiction with an honesty rarely seen in that decade. Lemmon earned his 3rd Oscar nomination for the role, and in later years he spoke openly about his recovery, often pointing back to this film as a turning point. The notorious Landlady appeared in 1962 as well, placing him back beside Kim Novak in a mystery comedy that mixed diplomats, suspicion, and murder twists. The film never found its footing with critics. Many felt the script was thin and the performances a little too broad. It still drew attention because of the Lemmon-Novak pairing, but it settled quietly into film history as a curious moment rather than a great one. Outside the screen, his personal life shifted too. His first marriage to Cynthia Stone had already fallen apart by 1957. They shared a son named Chris, born in 1954, but the relationship had been strained almost from the beginning. Lemmon later said they were trapped in an unhappy cycle they could never break. The divorce pushed him to focus on his work and his own emotional growth. In 1962, his life steadied again when he married Felicia Farr on August 17th while filming Irma La Douce in Paris. She had a daughter from a previous marriage, and Lemmon stepped into the role of stepfather with sincerity. Their own daughter, Courtney, arrived in 1966. Felicia helped him through his darkest moments, especially his struggles with alcohol, and their marriage became the anchor that held him steady for the rest of his life. That same year, the fortune cookie brought Walter Matthau into his world in a way that changed both their careers. Lemmon played Henry Hinkle, a cameraman pushed into faking a back injury for insurance money, while Matthau took on the role of a scheming lawyer. Matthau won an Oscar for it, and the bond between the two men grew so strong that they went on to share 10 films together. Their friendship continued off-screen too. Their wives became close. Their political views matched. Even after Matthau passed away in 2000, Lemmon still described their bond as the greatest gift of his career. Irma La Douce, also in 1963, gave Lemmon another chance to dive into Wilder's world. He played Nestor Patou, a policeman who fell for Shirley MacLaine's character and then disguised himself as a wealthy Englishman named Lord X to become her only client. He worked late-night shifts at a market to fund the ruse and even borrowed 500 francs from a bartender to keep the illusion alive. When he tossed the Lord X costume into the Seine to fake the character's death, everything spiraled into chaos. The film was bold, funny, and full of twists, and Lemmon earned a Golden Globe nomination for his performance. Later that same year, Under the Yum Yum Tree showed him as Hogan, a sly landlord who used cheap rent to lure attractive single tenants. His apartment was a shrine to seduction, complete with red walls, African sculptures, and a switch-operated fireplace. Critics noted that the character was predatory, even for the loose moral codes of that decade. But the film still earned 2 Golden Globe nominations in 1964, including one for Lemmon. Good Neighbor Sam arrived in 1964 and tossed him into another spiral of chaos. He played Sam Bissell, an ad man in San Francisco who had to pretend to be married to his neighbor Janet. so she could collect a $15 million inheritance. As his work life fell apart, surveillance cameras, private investigators, and a wave of mistaken identities piled up. The frantic pace turned the story into a screwball whirlwind, and audiences loved watching Lemmon scramble to keep everything together. The Great Race in 1965 pushed everything to a larger scale. Directed by Blake Edwards, the film handed Lemmon two separate roles. He played Professor Fate, a villain trying to sabotage an international race, and Crown Prince Friedrich Hapnick, a flamboyant royal who floated in and out of the story with his own strange charm. The movie was enormous, costing $12 million and filling the screen with giant sets, long sequences, a legendary pie fight, and a cast that included Tony Curtis, Natalie Wood, and Peter Falk. It made around $25 million worldwide and ranked as one of the year's biggest films, with Lemmon's dual performance earning praise from nearly everyone who saw it. Then came How to Murder Your Wife that same year. Lemmon stepped into the life of Stanley Ford, a cartoonist who accidentally married a woman he barely knew after a drunken night. When he sketched out a storyline where his comic strip character killed his wife, he acted out the scene with a mannequin for research. His real wife saw the sketches and left him, and the comic strip published the next morning made everyone believe he had actually committed the crime. The film's mix of real life and cartoon logic created a wild and surreal world, and Lemmon's energy kept the whole thing spinning in a way only he could deliver. His rise in the late 1960s carried a kind of bright confidence, and it began with The Odd Couple in 1968, where he stepped into the anxious heart of Felix Ungar. The film opened at Radio City Music Hall on May 1968 and stayed there for 14 straight weeks, bringing in $3.1 million from that one venue. Its budget was $1.2 million, but it earned more than $44.5 million in the United States, making it the third highest-grossing film of that year. Lemmon was paid $1 million plus a 10% share of the gross, while Walter Matthau took home $300,000. Their chemistry instantly clicked, and the success of this film spread into a sitcom on ABC, and even a sequel in 1998 that never found the same magic. Still, the original set a standard for comedy duos, and Lemmon's neat, nervous Felix always lived inside the scenes like a man who couldn't stop himself from cleaning the world around him. When he moved into The Out-of-Towners in 1970, that nervous energy shifted into something louder. Neil Simon's script dropped Jack Lemmon and Sandy Dennis into a storm of disasters as George and Gwen Kellerman, a couple who left Ohio dreaming of a simple job interview trip. Fog pushed their plane to Boston, their luggage vanished, and their troubles stacked up until everything felt dizzy. They were mugged in New York. George cracked a tooth on stale Cracker Jacks, and they found themselves accused of things they didn't even understand. The movie opened on May 28, 1970, under Lemmon's own company, Jalem Productions. It ended with a hijacked flight to Cuba and Gwen's unforgettable cry of "Oh my God." The film earned $15.2 million and became another reminder of how Lemmon could turn simple anxiety into something people loved watching. Soon after, he stepped behind the camera for Koch in 1971, his only time directing. This film carried Walter Matthau into the gentle sadness of an elderly man who refused to vanish into a nursing home and instead focused his energy on helping a pregnant teenage girl, played by Deborah Winters. Lemmon poured himself into directing in a way that drained him physically and emotionally, and he chose never to direct again. Koch premiered at Radio City Music Hall and ran through 114 minutes of quiet, sentimental storytelling. Even his wife, Felicia Farr, appeared on screen, which gave the film an intimate feel. Critics were mixed, but Lemmon never forgot how difficult that process felt. By the mid-1970s, his life began to twist between high achievements and private unraveling. His struggle with alcoholism grew heavier as the years passed. In 1974, he stood on an awards stage sounding slurred and uneasy, blaming medication and alcohol in a way that hinted at something deeper. In 1976, a DUI added another layer to the pain, though he managed to hide the arrest from the world for 2 decades. Even with these shadows, he delivered powerful work in films like The Prisoner of Second Avenue in 1975 and The China Syndrome in 1979. These roles helped lift him back into the spotlight with Oscar nominations and respect that never faded. It wasn't until 1998 that he openly admitted to years of struggling with addiction, and people saw the courage that carried him through. In The Prisoner of Second Avenue, he stepped into Mel Edison, a man crushed beneath job loss, city noise, crime, and frustration. The script grew out of real stories from Neil Simon's life, and Lemmon held on to that truth as he delivered scenes full of bitter laughter and raw fear. In one moment, he cut himself badly on set and kept going, proving again how deeply he committed to a role. His performance earned another Oscar nomination and connected with people living through economic struggle in the mid-1970s. Around that same time, he filmed The Front Page in 1974, returning to the fast banter of newsroom chaos. He played Hildy Johnson in a world of crooked politics and sensational journalism. While audiences enjoyed the sharp humor and Billy Wilder's direction, Lemmon himself was dealing with the fallout of his private DUI in 1976. He hired a full-time driver afterward, trying to keep his life steady. The film, though, showed how effortless he could make the balance between drama and comedy look. Then his career rose again with The China Syndrome in 1979. Lemmon played Jack Godell, a nuclear engineer who uncovered a deadly cover-up inside his plant. The timing of the film was eerie because the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident happened soon after. Critics praised Lemmon's intense performance, and he earned an Oscar nomination for it. His slow unraveling on screen as he tried to expose the truth made people feel the danger in every frame. As the late 1970s moved into the early 1980s, Lemmon stepped onto Broadway for a tribute performance in 1978 that earned him a Tony nomination. 2 years later, in 1980, he returned to film with another version of The Odd Couple that led to yet another Oscar nomination. These moments proved how steady his talent remained, no matter how many years passed. Then came missing in 1982, one of his most emotionally powerful roles. He played Ed Horman, a father searching for his son who vanished during the 1973 Chilean coup. The film stirred controversy, but struck critics with its depth, and Lemmon earned another Oscar nomination. His pain felt real because he carried a lot of his own. In September 1967, he had found his mother Millie dead in her apartment. She was 82, and her health had been failing, but the shock of discovering her himself stayed with him. Reporters wrote about it at the time, but Lemmon rarely spoke about the emotional wound it left behind. Even with that grief, he kept moving. In 1992, he delivered one of his finest late-career performances in Glengarry Glen Ross as Shelley Levane, a desperate salesman fighting to survive in a world that no longer believed in him. He was 67, yet he carried the role with a sharpness that earned him the Volpe Cup at the Venice Film Festival. His desperation, charm, and sadness blended into something unforgettable. Soon after, he reunited with Walter Matthau for Grumpy Old Men in 1993 and Grumpier Old Men in 1994. These films brought the two legends back together as neighbors who fought, teased, and competed for the attention of Anne Margaret, who played Ariel Truax. The first film made more than $60 million worldwide and reminded audiences how natural their partnership felt. The second film followed the marriages and new romances that grew from their rivalry. These comedies became some of Lemmon's most beloved late career hits. In 1997, he stepped into the jury room of 12 Angry Men as Juror 8 in the television remake. His quiet intensity carried the entire film, and awards followed. He received nominations at the Golden Globes and the Emmys. The Golden Globe ceremony became unforgettable when Ving Rhames won for A Different Movie, but handed his award to Jack Lemmon on stage, saying he believed Lemmon deserved it more. Lemmon tried to give it back, but Rhames refused. It became a moment people still talk about. Then came Tuesdays with Morrie in 1999, where Lemmon played Morrie Schwartz, a professor dying of ALS. His performance was soft, warm, and filled with truth. The movie won him the Emmy in 2000 and the Screen Actors Guild Award. It also won the Golden Globe for Best Miniseries. People felt like he poured years of wisdom into every scene, as if he knew it would be one of his final gifts to audiences. That same year, he returned to television in Inherit the Wind as Henry Drummond and earned another Emmy nomination. The film aired on May 28, 1999, and stood out thanks to his ability to command a scene with calm strength. It became one of the last major moments in a career that stretched across half a century. Meanwhile, life around him kept shifting. His son Chris Lemmon faced a serious illness decades later and underwent a lung transplant in 2018 at UCLA Medical Center. His daughter Courtney stayed mostly private, but supported her father's legacy quietly. Their challenges showed how fragile everything can be, no matter how famous a family becomes. Jack Lemmon's own health declined as he neared the end of his life. He was diagnosed with bladder cancer in 1999 and later with colon cancer. By 2001, the cancer had spread too far. He died on June 27, 2001, at 76, at USC Norris Comprehensive Cancer Center. His family stayed beside him. Years of smoking earlier in life likely played a part in the illness. His funeral drew quiet respect from across Hollywood, and he was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery,